At my birthday party, my mother-in-law made everyone laugh by telling them I got my job through pity hiring, then loudly asked, "Do you even deserve that promotion?" I tried to laugh it off. Until my boss walked in and said, "Actually, I was just about to say something important. I'm Nora Benson, 42 years old, born and raised in Sacramento, California, but I've lived in Portland, Oregon for the last 17 years. I work as a strategic partnerships manager for a mid-sized tech consultancy. I'm also a wife, a stepmother, and, until recently, the diplomatic punching bag of my mother-in-law, Marla. My marriage to Jonah wasn't a whirlwind romance. We met through mutual friends in our mid-30s, both a little worn out from life and carrying our own scars. Jonah had a daughter, Zoe, who was 10 at the time. I didn't want children of my own, but I tried my best to be there for her, careful never to overstep the unspoken line left behind by her late mother, Hannah. Marla, Jonah's mother, never forgave him for moving on. And she certainly never forgave me for taking her son away from Hannah's memory. At first, she was polite in a cold, clipped way. But as the years went on, that politeness frayed. Barbed compliments, underhanded comments at family dinners, the occasional "you wouldn't understand, you've never had kids of your own." Jonah, ever the diplomat, asked me to ignore it. "That's just how she is," he'd say. "She doesn't mean anything by it." Maybe he truly believed that. I didn't. But I let it go for years. Kept the peace. Swallowed the bitterness. Smiled through it all. Because I loved Jonah, and Zoe, and I believed that kindness, if consistent, might wear her down. Turns out, it didn't. My 42nd birthday was supposed to be a quiet affair. I booked a private room at Ava Jean's, an upscale Italian place on Division Street. Just 20 guests, mostly colleagues, close friends, and a few family members. Jonah helped with the arrangements, though as usual, Marla inserted herself. She insisted on helping decorate, despite my protests. She said she'd just keep it classy. I should have known that when she said classy, she meant control. The decorations were over the top. Giant white lilies and garish golden table runners. It looked more like a small wedding reception than a birthday party. I let it go, again, because I didn't want drama. Not on my day. The evening started fine. We had cocktails, appetizers, and laughter. I made a small speech thanking everyone, especially Jonah, who raised his glass and kissed my cheek. That's when Marla stood up. She clinked her glass with her butter knife, calling attention to herself. "I have a little something to say about our dear Nora," she began, smiling the way snakes might if they could. My stomach sank. Marla launched into a speech about how hard Nora had worked to get to where she was. Then she said, "Of course, it didn't hurt that your company has a, what's the word? Oh yes, diversity quota," she chuckled. "I mean, you were a pity hire, right?" The room fell silent. I laughed awkwardly, assuming she'd drop it. But she didn't. "And now a promotion? Really?" she continued. "Do you even deserve it?" The laughter from a few of Jonah's extended family members stung worse than the comment itself. I looked toward Jonah, who sat frozen, mouth half open, unsure what to do. My face burned. Then, as if on cue, the door opened. It was Mark Ritter, my boss. I'd invited him because we were close friends as well as colleagues, and he'd been mentoring me since day one. He walked in holding a small gift bag. He had no idea what he'd just walked into. There was an awkward silence. "Actually," he said, "I was just about to say something important." Mark walked directly toward me, kissed me on the cheek, and faced the room. "Sorry I'm late, traffic on the 5 was a nightmare," he joked. Then, turning to everyone, he said, "I didn't know this was a roast. If I'd known, I would have brought better material." Some chuckles. "But seriously," he continued, "I wanted to make this evening special because Nora has just been named our new Director of Strategic Growth. The promotion goes public Monday." Gasps around the room. A few people clapped. I froze. She's not only the most capable person I've ever worked with, but she's earned every single win. There was no pity hire, no handout. Just grit, intelligence, and hard work. Marla's smile evaporated. Mark handed me the gift, an engraved pen and a leather-bound journal. "You're going to need this for all the strategy work ahead," he said warmly. I choked up, thanked him, and finally turned to Marla, who was sipping her wine as if nothing had happened. The rest of the night went on, but something had shifted. Marla didn't speak to me again. Jonah looked sheepish, and we drove home in near silence. 2 days later, I sat Jonah down. We needed to talk. I told him that while I loved him, I couldn't keep doing this with his mother. That I needed his support, real support, not just passive neutrality. He apologized. Again. And like every other time before, he said, "I'll talk to her." But I told him that wasn't enough. This wasn't just about a party. It was years of emotional erosion, and I was drowning in it. The party had just ripped off the lid on something that had been festering. I needed change. Not promises. "I can't keep defending myself in a home where I'm already supposed to be safe," I said. He cried. I did too. Over the next few weeks, we went to counseling. For the first time, he really listened. He confronted Marla, who, as expected, played the victim. "She's turning you against your own mother," she wailed. But Jonah stood firm. For once. And then came the final straw. Zoe, now 17, overheard Marla on the phone with her friend, saying, "Nora's just not cut out for a family. She's always been a career girl. Cold. That's why she'll never really be a mother to Zoe." Zoe told me. She was furious. That night, Jonah told Marla she wasn't welcome in our home until she could treat me with respect. She didn't speak to us for 3 months. It's been over a year now since that party. Marla and I aren't close, and I've stopped trying to make her like me. That's not my job. What changed is that Jonah sees it now. Really sees it. He no longer tries to paper over the tension. He stands up for me, even when it's uncomfortable. Zoe and I are closer than ever. She starts college in the fall, UC Davis, just like I did. She wrote in her application essay that I was the biggest influence in her life. Mark retired 6 months ago. I now sit on the executive board and have started mentoring young women in tech, especially those who are often told they're diversity hires. And every time I sign a new contract with that pen he gave me, I remember the night it all changed. Not because of revenge, but because I finally stopped laughing it off. And started standing up. "Do you even deserve that promotion, Nora?" Marla's voice cut through the room like glass breaking on concrete. I tried to force a chuckle, pretending it didn't sting. I reached for my wine glass with fingers that trembled slightly. All eyes were on me. Some amused, others pitying. Then the restaurant door opened, and my boss stepped in. Actually, I was just about to say something important. And just like that, everything cracked wide open, years of resentment, denial, and unspoken bitterness spilled into the open, beginning with that one humiliating sentence. "My name is Nora. I'm 42, and I've lived in Portland, Oregon for most of my adult life. I married my husband, Jonah, 7 years ago. We met in our mid-30s, 2 adults with lived experience and emotional baggage, but also a quiet hunger for stability and companionship." Jonah was a widower. His first wife, Hannah, had passed away from breast cancer when their daughter Zoe was just 5. When we met, Zoe was 10, a gentle and observant kid who'd already endured more loss than she should have. I knew from the start that stepping into the life of a grieving father and his daughter would be delicate, and I never tried to fill Hannah's shoes. Instead, I focused on being consistent, kind, and present. Not pushing, but always showing up. Jonah's mother, Marla, made it clear early on that she did not approve. At first, her disapproval was masked in passive-aggressive comments. Subtle enough that if I called it out, I'd seem overly sensitive. Over the years, it escalated, jokes that weren't really jokes, thinly veiled criticisms, offhand remarks about how a real mother would know, Or how Hannah would have handled things differently. Jonah, bless his conflict-avoidant heart, always told me to let it go. That Marla was just old school, that she didn't mean harm. I learned to tolerate it. I thought that maybe, over time, she would accept me. I tried everything, inviting her for dinners, buying her thoughtful birthday gifts, asking for her help with decorating or cooking. I thought if I just kept showing up with grace, she would eventually see me. But she didn't want to see me. Not really. She wanted her son's life frozen at the point where Hannah still existed in it. I wasn't a new chapter, I was an intrusion. And then came the party. Turning 42 isn't exactly a landmark birthday, but after 2 years of grinding through work, surviving layoffs, and finally getting shortlisted for a major promotion, I felt like celebrating. I booked a private room at Ava Jean's, an upscale Italian restaurant on Portland's east side. Cozy lighting, artisan pasta, perfect wine. I invited a small group of colleagues and friends, and Jonah helped with the logistics. Marla insisted on being involved too. She offered to help decorate, even though I gently tried to discourage it. She showed up an hour early with oversized metallic balloons, dramatic flower arrangements, and heavy-handed gold linens that clashed with the restaurant's elegant vibe. But I swallowed my discomfort. Again. As the evening wore on, I started to feel relaxed. The room was filled with laughter. I caught up with coworkers, old friends, and even Zoe, now 17, who sat at the end of the table smiling in that half-teen, half-adult way that made me so proud of the woman she was becoming. And then Marla stood up. She tapped her glass with her fork and cleared her throat. At first, I thought she was going to say something sweet. That maybe, after all this time, she was going to offer a peace offering wrapped in a toast. She started off with forced warmth. Nora has worked so hard over the years, she began. Of course, a little help from corporate quotas doesn't hurt, she added with a smirk. There was a pause, uneasy laughter from a couple of Jonah's distant cousins. I blinked. Marla didn't stop. Let's be honest. Companies these days will hire anyone to tick the right boxes. That's how you got your start, right, Nora? Pity hiring? The room went dead silent. I tried to smile. Tried to act like it didn't knock the wind out of me. And then she added, louder this time, do you even deserve that promotion? I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in my seat, blood draining from my face. People were looking at me with a mix of pity, embarrassment, and curiosity. I turned to Jonah, who looked stunned and uncomfortable, but said nothing. And that's when the door opened. Mark Ritter, my boss, walked in holding a small gift bag and a bottle of wine. He looked around, sensing the tension, but carried on as if everything was normal. I hope I'm not too late, he said, handing me the bag. Then he looked toward the guests and added, I was actually just about to say something important. He stood next to me, put a hand on my shoulder, and smiled. I'm thrilled to officially congratulate Nora tonight. She's being promoted to Director of Strategic Growth. The announcement goes live Monday morning, but I wanted to tell her in person. She's earned every bit of it. There was a collective gasp. Clapping. A few people gave me small smiles, others looked away. Jonah finally smiled and squeezed my hand. Mark continued. It's not just her intelligence. It's her integrity, her leadership, and her ability to stay calm under pressure, even when the pressure is wildly inappropriate. A few people chuckled. Marla didn't. I stood up, blinking back tears, and thanked him. We hugged. And then I sat down and excused myself to the restroom. I locked the door and stared at myself in the mirror. The woman staring back looked polished, successful, and completely gutted. That was the moment something shifted. Something internal. Like a snapping thread that had been strained too long. I didn't say anything to Jonah that night. Not yet. The ride home was quiet. He kept asking if I was okay, and I just said I was tired. But I wasn't tired. I was done. Done with being the one who had to keep the peace. The one who smiled through insults. The one who was always bending, accommodating, hoping, and giving the benefit of the doubt. That night, I laid awake, staring at the ceiling in the dark while Jonah slept. For the first time, I didn't wonder what I had done to make Marla treat me this way. I wondered why I had allowed it. Why Jonah had allowed it. And what it would mean if nothing changed. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I brewed coffee in silence and sat at the kitchen island, scrolling aimlessly through emails I couldn't focus on. The soft clink of Jonah's slippers on the hardwood made me look up. He rubbed his eyes and gave me a sheepish smile. "You okay?" he asked, reaching for a mug. I didn't respond right away. I studied him. The way his graying hair curled slightly at the temples, the crease between his brows that deepened when he was trying not to rock the boat. "I'm not okay," I said softly. He looked up. "I haven't been okay for a long time, Jonah." He sighed, sat across from me. I know what she said was awful. "I'm sorry." I didn't expect her to, that's the problem, I interrupted. You never expect it. Even after she's done this over and over. Every time, you're surprised. And every time, you ask me to let it go. He opened his mouth to speak, but I held up a hand. Do you know how humiliating it was to sit there, in a room full of people I work with, and hear your mother joke about me being a diversity hire? And then question whether I deserve a promotion? Can you even begin to imagine how that felt? He looked down, ashamed. No. I can't. She humiliated me, Jonah. In public. She's been undermining me for years, quietly, passive-aggressively, but last night she crossed a line. She did, he agreed, almost in a whisper. And you said nothing? His head dropped. It wasn't a fight. We weren't yelling. But the weight of everything unsaid was louder than screaming. I need to know, I continued. Do you think I deserve this? The promotion, the job, my life? His eyes snapped up, startled. Of course I do. Then why is it always on me to defend that? Why am I the only one standing between her and my self-respect? He looked like I'd slapped him. I thought staying out of it was neutral. That it would keep things peaceful. Neutrality isn't peace. It's complicity. Silence stretched between us. For once, he didn't try to argue. He didn't apologize or make excuses. He just nodded. I'll talk to her, he said. No. You'll tell her, I corrected. You'll tell her what she did, and that it's not acceptable. That there are consequences. He looked like he didn't know whether to be grateful I was still sitting there or terrified that I might not be tomorrow. The conversation with Marla happened 2 days later. I wasn't there, I didn't want to be. But I heard all about it from Jonah. She cried. Of course, she did. Claimed I was overreacting. That she was just trying to be funny, and that people these days were too sensitive. But Jonah stood his ground, for once. He told her that if she wanted to be a part of our lives, she would need to apologize. Sincerely. Publicly, if possible. And that any further disrespect would result in serious distance, not just from me, but from Zoe too. Marla's response was to tell him he was choosing that woman over his own blood. He told her he was choosing his wife. That was the first time, he told me, that he realized how long he'd been waiting for his mother's permission to fully move on from his previous life. That maybe he'd always felt a little guilty about falling in love again. That night, Jonah came home pale and exhausted. He slumped on the couch next to me and said, I told her she's not welcome here until she respects you. I don't know when or if she will. I nodded. My body felt heavy, but my chest also loosened for the first time in years. Like I could finally take a full breath. 3 weeks passed without a word from Marla. No texts. No guilt-tripping emails. Nothing. It was like she'd been scrubbed from our lives overnight. And in that quiet, something beautiful happened. I started to feel peace. For the first time, I could wake up without that tight knot in my stomach, wondering when the next comment would come. I started to believe that my home was my safe space again. That I wasn't constantly waiting to defend my place in it. Zoe noticed too. One night, she came into my office while I was working on a presentation and leaned against the doorframe. "Hey," she said. "Hey. Just wanted to say. I'm sorry she said those things. Grandma, I mean. That wasn't okay." I turned to face her. "Thank you. I've heard her say stuff like that before," she admitted. "I just didn't know how to, bring it up." "It's okay. You shouldn't have to carry that. She's different when it's just me and her. Nice, but kind of manipulative. She makes me feel guilty for having a relationship with you." My throat tightened. "But I'm not gonna let her anymore," she added quickly. "You've been there for me more than she ever has. And I love you." I stood and pulled her into a hug. I didn't need her to say those words to feel them, but hearing them was healing in a way I didn't know I needed. At work, things were soaring. The promotion went public, and while there were a few raised eyebrows, tech is still a male-dominated space. After all, most people were genuinely supportive. Mark was retiring later that year and had already started grooming me to take over even more of the company's leadership responsibilities. But every now and then, in the quiet moments, folding laundry, driving to Trader Joe's, brushing my teeth, I'd hear Marla's voice in my head, "Do you even deserve that promotion?" It lingered, like a splinter under the skin. And it made me realize how deep the wounds of doubt go when they're inflicted by someone who should have been your family. About a month after the party, I received a letter. Not an email. Not a text. A real letter. Neatly folded in a pale pink envelope, my name handwritten in careful cursive. It was from Marla. The apology was, well, let's call it an attempt. She used words like misunderstanding and unintended offense. She framed it as generational miscommunication, that she had tried to be funny and edgy to fit in with my friends and coworkers. She even wrote that she had always admired my ambition. But nowhere in the letter did she say she was sorry. Nowhere did she acknowledge that what she said wasn't just an oops, but a deliberate humiliation, a targeted jab at everything I had worked for. The letter was a thinly veiled attempt at getting her seat back at the table without actually taking responsibility for anything. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Instead, I got busy. I poured myself into work. Mentored 2 new hires, both young women of color who reminded me of who I used to be when I first joined the company. I got involved with a local nonprofit that helps women re-enter the workforce after leaving abusive relationships. And I spent more time with Zoe, movie nights, college application brainstorming, teaching her how to drive. Just life. My life. Without her in it. It was amazing how much space opened up when I stopped giving her rent-free lodging in my mind. Then, about 3 months later, Jonah got a call. Marla had slipped and broken her wrist. Nothing life-threatening, just inconvenient. She wanted help, needed someone to take her to appointments, pick up groceries, help her with a few household things. Jonah asked me what I thought. "I think she should hire someone," I said without flinching. He paused, then nodded. I was thinking the same. And so she did. She paid out of pocket for a home assistant service. And according to Zoe, who visited a few times on her own terms, Marla didn't love the arrangement. She complained about the cost, the strangers in her house, how people don't care for family the way they used to. But family, as she defined it, had always been a one-way street. And then came Zoe's graduation party. Zoe wanted a backyard gathering, something warm and meaningful. We rented a canopy tent, had local food trucks cater, and invited friends, school staff, and family. Including Marla. I'll admit, I hesitated. But Zoe wanted her there, so I agreed. I just made a decision ahead of time, this wasn't about Marla. This was about Zoe. The day of the party, Marla showed up in a light lavender blouse, with a strained smile and a box of pastries from a high-end bakery. She looked around, uncertain, almost nervous. I greeted her politely, thanked her for the pastries, and moved on. She wasn't the center of anything. Not the drama. Not the power. She was just a guest. When it was time for toasts, Jonah spoke beautifully. Zoe followed, thanking both her parents, and she looked directly at me when she said it. My eyes welled up, and I didn't even care that I smeared mascara down my cheeks. Then Zoe handed me a small box. Inside was a keychain. A simple brushed metal plate with the words "You always showed up." Thank you. Marla clapped awkwardly from the back row. Later that evening, I saw her standing alone by the drink table. She looked over at me, perhaps waiting for me to approach. Maybe she thought I'd start a conversation. Offer a photo together. Some gesture that things were back to normal. But I didn't walk over. I smiled, nodded once, and returned to the people who actually mattered. The final twist of the knife, though I didn't intend it that way, came 6 months later. The company announced that Mark's replacement would be me. I was stepping into an executive role, overseeing 3 departments and reporting directly to the board. The announcement made local business news. It was featured in Portland Monthly. My face and name, right there in print. I didn't boast. I didn't even share it on my personal social media. But Zoe saw it and reposted it proudly. A week after the article ran, I received another envelope. No note inside, just a clipping of the article. Underlined in red ink was a single sentence: Nora Benson is a trailblazer in her field, widely respected for her mentorship, innovation, and calm under pressure. No signature. No message. Just that. I slipped the clipping into a drawer and didn't give it a second thought. That was my revenge. Not cruelty. Not confrontation. Just success. Distance. And the quiet realization on her part that she no longer had the power to humiliate me. That I had removed her from the center of my world. The most satisfying revenge wasn't about getting back at Marla. It was about finally, completely, and unapologetically choosing me. And once I did, everything else fell into place.